and let us all do we can to build a better future. The rent and everything else, because the thing is, the way corporate media and the political establishment and the ruling establishment have their narrative, they want to make it seem like it's our fault, when in fact it's them that implemented these policies. It's just not one day that everyone woke up and said, oh yeah, everything's fine. We like things like how they are. We like the fact that wages haven't increased in years. We like the fact that our system is falling apart. It's okay, and our politicians are assuming that we like this. No, everyone's been screaming about this for decades. We have a massive amount of income inequality. Owning a home is now a true, real dream. And in fact, if you are a homeowner or a renter, it's a goddamn nightmare, because every single day you're wondering, are you going to be evicted from your home or apartment? Yeah. Because that's a very real situation in the richest country in the world, where we have money to bail out the rich, money for a joint strike fighter that can't even fly. What, it's now 1.5 trillion now that we're wasting on that damn thing?
It's likely more than that. Like years ago, it was 1.5 trillion.
Yeah.
All right, I do have one more bit of news that I want to share, and it's kind of exciting. Okay. The FCC, our friends at the FCC, they're preparing for their meeting on June 17th, which is an open commission meeting. I believe it's possible to stream and watch it. They've got a lot on the agenda, but one of the things that they have on the agenda is reconsidering some rules for the governance of low-power FM stations. And those of you who have been following me on this particular issue, these are licenses for community radio stations, about 100 watts power, which, depending on where you are, could cover maybe a few miles, but in urban areas that can be quite dense, quite a few people. But the idea is to promote local community radio with these licenses. The transmitters usually are not that expensive, and it allows people to operate local media, independent local media. It has to be not-for-profit. The issue has been is that these licenses are usually not open. In fact, I think it's now been about 8 years since there's been an opening for these licenses. But the FCC is going to be going over some rules and reconsidering some rules and starting to firm things up so that they can begin that licensing process again. Now, again, one of the things I would point out is that this is great for independent local media creators who would like to offer hyper-local radio, which of course can absolutely be streamed worldwide. There are plenty of systems that allow for that to happen. But I would also point out, we recently had a story here on Hardlands Media about how a court ruled that YouTubers were not journalists. Mm-hmm. Well, here's the thing. Now, that may eventually get itself sorted out, and it sounds like, again, one of these archaic rules that nobody's bothered to change. But I'm going to say this. If you've got local media groups who suddenly have access to a radio station, yeah, they're journalists. Nobody's going to question an FCC radio station. That's federal. And so this is an opportunity. And I also want to say one more thing. Given what we know about hackers, given what we know about social media, the various outrage mobs, the fact that some people are beginning to question whether being online and scrolling is actually good for our brains, we may actually, we may actually see some real shifts in internet use. People may become more afraid to give private information online. People may just be kind of pulling back a little bit. And we might see other media sources coming back more into favor now that people are beginning to realize, well, maybe I'm not getting the news from my feeds. Maybe local media is important. Maybe independent media is important. I'm pleased to see the FCC doing this, and I think it's a great opportunity for us here, but also many of you who I know who are involved in local independent media to get something going in your own communities.
Yeah, it's something that, you've got me, we've talked about this over years, and I've been convinced that we definitely need to add this to our roster when we are able to do so, because it just seems like a reasonable thing to do. And I think a good selling point is that it's very private. No one can pick up what you're listening to. It's also very local, which is, a lot of what some of our newer channels are doing. So it makes a lot of sense. Plus, we've had experience trying to do advertising on AM. They want you on FM, so this would be nice.
I think that that's absolutely the case. And I also want to point out that you can't be shadow banned. There's no shadow banning. You can't have a platform that you can't just be kicked off because the FCC has rules. and you follow the rules, you keep your license. And if they try to take your license away, you have an outlined, documented appeals process, which does not exist on platforms, on online platforms.
I'm gonna put a quote out from Myra Sanchez. I wonder who that is. Wouldn't that mean people need to follow FCC rules like no swearing? Yeah. But we already sort of do that with YouTube, so I'm not really sure what the distinction is.
And at this point, we understand what the rules are. And we know those rules. We know there are things there are the naughty words that we cannot say. But the thing is, we know we've gotten in trouble for saying words that are not naughty.
Yeah.
They just, we have communicated ideas that the powers that be don't like.
And also, if I'm not mistaken, isn't there software that can automatically bleep for?
Yes, there's there's
exactly,
automatic there's software there. You have an engineer, and there's also some really cool web platforms that allow you to stream around the world. There's licensing agreements so the music can be played. There's a lot of really cool stuff that can be done with this, and it's kind of an exciting time. So I'm really thrilled to see that the FCC is getting its act together.
And the thing is too, again, just like on a bigger picture, because we covered the situation in Washington State. Anyone that is going to seriously think about getting involved in YouTube and doing what we're doing, know your state's rules and regulations, and also try and get your press passes, try and get incorporated, because let's face it, it's going to be a big uphill climb. And with this ruling by the FCC, it's going to make things a little bit easier. So, all avenues of approach are good, because in this day and age, if you want to be speaking truth to power, you're going to have to be on your toes, but also know and when to take advantage of opportunities that come your way. So I'm very glad that this is at least available to radio operators.
And I would just say that it's like the hardest part of this process seems to be, at least from my understanding, just getting access to a radio signal or getting access to a certain frequency.
Hold on, Dan, I got to interrupt you. Ecuadorian Taco 27, Harlan's Media should start a radio station. Interesting point. That's kind of how we got started in the first place.
It's how we got started in the first place, because actually Chicago supports several community radio stations.